year-end projections is 1.6 million. And then the next part of that update is expenditures year to date. They're at 247,786.82 cents. It gives you a detail. Clint's provided the detail of expenditures next to each of those categories. And really what's happened with Measure R so far is that it's been much slower implementing these positions and these wages than we assumed. Recruiting has been just unbelievably difficult. I touch a little bit on that later on in this document, but we're having a difficulty with getting a number of applicants, getting qualified applicants. We have applicants that don't show up to interviews. We have applicants that we contact after offering the job and they don't respond to phone calls or emails. They completely just ghost us. They disappear. And so we've had several situations over the past several months. A lot of our positions require testing before you get to the actual final interview. We've scheduled 10 to 12 tests and 2 people show up. And so it's been just a regular thing. It's been going for 6 months to a year now. It's really unbelievable. Positions that we typically would have, I'm sorry, I'm choking on the coffee.
That's all right.
Then we would typically have, 15, 20, even 30 applicants. We're getting 2 to 5 if we're lucky. So we just ran a recruitment for,
Are they even qualified?
and many times they're not.
I just had a job closed with 2 applicants last week. I was notified yesterday that one's already pulled their name out of them.
Is there any insight as to why everybody's?
Nothing really.
Well, they already live here locally. It's not we're not referring to, they're not moving here. I don't know.
But I mean, I'm even hearing that from the private sector. We have people on the board that have own businesses. I have neighbors that own businesses. It's impossible to find help. They have openings, whether it's labor, whether it's office work, whether it's, anything. It's just really difficult to find people these days. And they're losing people fast too. They hire people that they hope will work out and they don't. They work for a month or 2 and then they're gone again. So it's been pretty weird cycle we're going through right now.
For months, they sit at home and watch Netflix.
Yeah, right, exactly. Any questions on that as far as the revenue expenditures?
Maybe we can get to it a little bit. I was looking over the document.
Christina, do you want me to talk to the microphone?
Can we talk to the microphone?
Sorry about that.
Press and hold.
Press and hold, yeah. I'm ready to let you know.
It's on now. Can you hear me now? I was looking at the document, the 498-page document of all the budgetary stuff. I don't know if this really is applicable, but I was looking at some of the things that were on the budget for, just like the Sheriff's Department, for example. Let me go to my notes. What I was looking at was, I can kind of understand why you guys have a regular retirement system in CalPERS, because some people don't qualify for CalPERS, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you guys can answer that. Because like with the Sheriff's Department, they have people that are on CalPERS. I know the sworn officers are on CalPERS. But what about the office people? Can they be put on CalPERS? Or then my question to you, if they're on CalPERS, why is there 2 retirement systems?
CalPERS, every county employee is under CalPERS. There's a miscellaneous unit and there's a safety unit. The sworn officers are under the safety unit. The
Okay.
miscellaneous unit is just about everybody else.
And that's what that retirement system is for.
Yes.
I kind of thought so, but it was kind of a little bit
Yeah.
weird there. A couple of the other things I was looking at was with the Sheriff's Department, aircraft rental. What's that? It's 20. Is that a drone or is that?
So historically, that's they've done helicopter flights for illegal marijuana grows usually.
Mhm.
Get funding for that from the Forest Service. So
Right.
they rent a helicopter, take them and fly.
Oh, okay.
Reconnaissance.
Okay, because I was looking at that and I'm like, that price jumped from year to year. It was like $3,500 to $20,000. I was thinking, well, maybe you guys got a drone.
No, it's it's usually rental. They can get aircraft and it can be a fixed wing as well.
Right.
It's helicopters and fixed wing aircraft to fly for marijuana reconnaissance.
All right, well, now that brings up another question. If that's the case, is there any way that the county could just like, I know you can buy some aircraft now that are really inexpensive, that are under $10,000. And would it be more cost effective to have our own aircraft and get an officer trained to pilot that aircraft? I know you have annuals on the aircraft. I know that you got,
There's pretty substantial liability
There- there-
running and operating aircraft.
right, I understand that, but I'm just wondering if maybe it would be a cheaper way or a more cost-effective way, I guess.
But cost will be reimbursed. So that particular line item has, there's a funding source for that.
Right,
And it allows for the rental of aircraft.
right,
So and also employees' time, the officers' time in the aircraft.
right.
So I don't think we've ever looked into buying our own because there's so much overhead. I know the
Well-
insurance and things and training a pilot.
Right.
Or the Forest Service will just rent us, more or less rent us the vehicle and go and do the job.
That's probably a better way to go. You have to forgive me. I worked for the city of LA, and the city of Los Angeles had 22 helicopters. They had 3 SWAT helicopters. They had 3 fixed-wing aircraft. I mean, they had tons of ghetto birds in the air. So, and I know the budgeting's bigger and that kind of thing. I'm just curious to, see how things go here. Yeah. I had a buddy of mine who worked in maintenance. Another thing I looked at was the sheriff's department had minor equipment, and in 2020 they only had $3,100, and then it jumped to almost $25,000. What minor equipment does that encompass? Is that like
So minor equipment is anything under $2,000.
right?
That price tag, or 5,000, sorry. It could be anything. If they get that little detail, you have to get a little more involved.
You have to get a little more involved in.
It could be something as much as buying body cameras. It could be
Well-
tasers. It could be.
Okay, because in the budgetary thing, it showed that there was already a line item for cameras and a line item for tasers. So I was just kind of, I was just kind of curious because it had a big jump, and another thing that I was looking at was, the computers that the sheriff's department uses, they're leased. Why are they leased? I was curious.
That's a system run through our county IT department. All of our computers are on lease, so that they're updated every 3 years. It's more cost effective than trying to buy computers, dispose of the computer, buy new computers. They phase out so rapidly.
Oh, I know they phase out rapidly. City of LA, though, they were buying 8,000 or 9,000 of them at a time, and we had IT guys that would just go and run the updates. They run the updates, or if one broke down, they would just go ahead and get it repaired, get it updated, and ship it back out. So I'm just asking questions. I'm just,
Yeah, I know also that in the past, that some of the computers, we actually retain them at the end of the lease.
Mhm.
The company doesn't really want them back, and so we can either auction them off, we've donated them to the school district,
Mhm.
and a lot of different things with them.
sure, that sounds great too. I'm just trying to understand some of the stuff. I mean, I don't want to.
To touch a little bit more on that minor equipment line, you'll see fluctuations like that.
Well,
Some things will be outdated after 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
Update their equipment.
Sure,
Yeah.
I understand that. I'm
Usually
just.
officer safety equipment.
It's swap with helmets and stuff. Yeah.
Sure, that kind of stuff, I understand, you got to have that stuff, like the body armor has a very short shelf life, no matter what, you got to replace those, and those are costly. I know those are costly.
It doesn't matter. You hire people.
Yeah, exactly, I understand that, A couple other things, on vehicles, I wanted to get into, it said that there was going to be leasing of vehicles for the sheriff's department. How is that going to work out?
Initially, that was the thought. We actually do have interdepartment funding for leasing.
Mhm.
We have internal financing. We found out years ago that it's more cost effective to fund it internally, because if you go out to an outside lease, you're paying a higher percentage. And so we had the Stimson funding that came through years and years ago.
Mhm.
And so it was a pot of money that the board kind of controlled for capital improvements, and so we set up an internal financing system to where our departments, if they can't afford to purchase something outright, they can lease it over a number of years, and so then the interest comes back into the general fund. It's never that significant, it's like 2%. Usually it's based on whatever, yeah. I think
Right.
it's late
It's
plus-
an internal lease.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not,
Our money to buy it, and then we plan.
okay, because I was just kind of curious, I mean, I was thinking, man, you're leasing, you know,
Yeah.
police vehicles. Those things are trash when they're done. Okay, I know they're trash when they're
And
pretty much.
There's a term limit on the lease, and I think it's 3 years.
Yes, I like the vehicles, so patrol vehicles are estimated, CHP's possession.
Right.
So that's why you just get 3 year lease.
Right, because Highway Patrol puts about 180,000 every 3 O's.
That's the standard.
Yeah.
You just adhere to that standard.
Right. Now, is it a mileage thing or is it an age thing that you guys do?
So ours is, I would say both, the average mileage.
Mhm.
For a pursuit vehicle, I want to say it's around 100,000 miles, which is about 3 years. So it's a 3 year lifespan that we advertise for depreciation. And
Okay.
if something after 3 years only has 70,000 miles on it, we still own the vehicle.
Right.
Still can use it, but then it's paid off, fully depreciated.
Right, that kind of thing. Okay, okay, because I was looking at that and I'm going, you know, like with the leasing and that kind of thing, I was like, it's an,
Owns the vehicle, it's just.
all right, so you guys purchased the vehicles, and then it's just done through an internal lease type thing.
You have a pot of money, you use
Pot of
that
money, sure.
Finish that money, so then 3 years later.
They can reuse the money. Okay. I fully understand that, okay, because you know, and, but I did notice that there was no fixed assets in the budget for the sheriff's department. Oh,
Clint, you guys, we're going to talk, you guys have to stand by the microphone, I can't hear.
Oh, here.
Anybody, but unless you guys pass.
I can move over.
If you want to sit closer. But we have yeah, you know, sit there or sit on that one over there probably.
Or you can sit over there and we pass the mic.
And anyone else is either need to use the mic, come to the dais.
You can sit at any of these as well.
Okay, stand.
Okay.
The camera's behind me. That's my best side.
That's my best side too, by the way.
I'm jealous of not getting stand.
Yeah.
The thing I was at, you know, I noticed that there was 0 fixed assets for vehicles for the sheriff's department. I don't mean to be harping on that, but that's where they were getting, sheriff's department was getting the bulk of the Measure R money. And I was just, you know, wondering why there was no fixed assets assessed to any of the vehicles for the sheriff's department. Is that common practice?
So,
Yeah, there will actually be an update on that coming in the next coming budget meeting.
Okay.
In the Measure R funding, if you guys will remember, we actually did a lease line for 3 patrol vehicles.
Right.
And I think it was 3 to 5 patrol vehicles.
Right.
Depending on cost.
Right.
And
Right, 'cause-
that's changed now because their sales tax also for the safety sales tax is projected to be quite a bit over revenue, or that was budgeted also.
Okay.
And so the sheriff's department has come forward with a budget revision
Mhm.
to buy the vehicles outright as opposed to leasing them and try to avoid those interest costs. And so this next meeting at the 3/8 meeting on Tuesday,
Mhm.
there'll be a budget transfer for the sheriff's office so they can buy 3 patrol vehicles outright as well as a transport van. The current transport van has over 300,000 miles on it. And
That's
probably-
done.
Probably some duct tape and other things.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
anyway, so they're planning to replace that as well.
Okay, so in other words, you're not going to use, they weren't going to use the pot of money that we just talked about to buy the vehicles. They're going to purchase them with the Measure R money outright. Is that how that's
It will not
working?
Measure our money now, it's going to be regular sales tax that goes through safety sales tax, and Clint can talk more to that.
Okay.
if you'd like to, but-
yeah, so initially it was set up as an internal lease.
Right.
So we're not recording the vehicles as an asset in the upfront because they're still being leased.
Oh, okay.
So while they're being leased, they're not recorded as an asset. But now that we're going to update the budget process and buy them outright, we'll see an asset be added to that department.
Okay.
With the amount of money. And actually, I believe we were discussing, we had some money set aside through Measure R for the leasing process.
Right.
Still using that same dollar figure, but instead of using it for a lease, just apply that to the payment and then use the increased sales tax from Prop 172, which is what public safety gets from the
Right.
state, combined with those 2 funding sources to buy them outright. And then we won't have to worry about costs going into the future. So
Okay.
it'll be a full purchase and you'll see the assets after the next board meeting. We'll update the budget and it'll be
Okay,
there.
okay. Then what about the sheriff's boats?
Boats.
Doesn't he have a boat? I thought I saw him towing a boat.
They have a boating unit.
Yeah.
So
Do they have their own boat?
they do. They have multiple boats.
Okay. Because they weren't shown on the
So you
budget either.
So in the budget process, you would see any purchase of new equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were to buy a new boat, it would be on their budget, and it wouldn't be in the patrol budget. It would be in the boating safety budget.
Right, that's where I looked at it, was in
And
the
so
voting
once they
safety.
purchase those vehicles, they come off, so all you're seeing is the purchase of the asset.
Right.
If you wanted a listing of all of their assets, that's a different
Okay,
system.
okay, so in other words, that'd be under a completely different, if you did a complete audit
Yeah.
of, say like the sheriff's department or the jail or
So
whatever.
every year we
that would
update their
show up.
assets.
It would show up in there.
Is that listed in that huge 483-page
So
financial or
that
budget
huge report you're seeing, that's just the current year's spending plan,
Okay,
the budget. So they've already purchased the boats, say 3 or 4 years ago, which some of them are about that old. You won't see them there because they're not being newly purchased. It's not part of that spending plan. It was already approved in prior years. If someone wants the asset listing, we can always provide that. Not a problem.
okay, I was just mainly concerned because I was looking at, me as a layman, looking at the, budget line items, to me, it raised red flags. And I just wanted to, I guess red flag wouldn't be the appropriate thing. Maybe a yellow flag would probably be a better.
So when we talk about assets in general, boats, cars, anything over $5,000, the budget is just going to be that year's spending plan. So they've already been purchased in prior years. It's not part of that current year's spending plan, so it
Okay.
won't be there. If someone were to want to see the list of assets that belong to the sheriff's office, they can do a request through my office and we can provide that.
Like I said, I was looking at that big document and
Yeah.
I was just, scrolling through and looking at where our Measure R money was going, and looking through some of the stuff that was going on through there. And I had questions. I think several of us had questions on that stuff. And that's why I'm bringing it forward.
Yeah,
We're
the more
not,
questions about the budget, the better.
Yeah,
The better
absolutely.
people understand it.
right, and that's what I figured. And I figured, well, we'll just talk about it while we're here. If we can get some good answers, then we know what's going on.
And I'm glad someone else is going through that 500-page document too. Someone else probably looks at it.
Well, it's something that, for us, we want to make sure that the money that we're overseeing goes to the right places, and we want to make sure that it's spent in the best way possible, I guess would be the way to say that. Get the best bang for our buck.
Sure.
And we wanted to make sure that, we were looking at it and we wanted to make sure that there was, that there were some questions. We knew you guys had the answers and we just wanted to get the answers so we knew where to go from. And I knew had to be a logical answer for them, but I just wanted to make sure, because some of them, like I said, raised yellow flags, so we wanted to look at it, and take a special look. The one other thing that I found was under the jails, and that was in the nursing contract. Now that was budgeted in 2020, and the 2020-2021 budget was $260,000. This year it's over $1.1 million. How come?
You want-
Well, that's a great question. It's actually kind of unfortunate. The contract for our service provider, who was local, ended last fiscal year prior to this. So we did a request for proposal for bids for the services, which we have to do as a government agency.
Sure.
We received one responsive bid from somebody who was outside of the area, who is a corporation that provides jail medical all across California and in other states as well. They're called WellPath. They used to be called CFG. I think it's Forensic Medical Group, California Forensic Medical Group. They were bought out by WellPath. Their contract for us was $1.4 million for our jail and juvenile medical, a change of about $800,000.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see that reflected in the jail budget and also the juvenile hall budget.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yep.
I saw where it jumped there too.
It's
but
the
it wasn't
same
as-
situation. One company provides services to both facilities.
for both facilities, but you have to have two different budgets for them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Clarify, you say you put that out for bid and they're the only ones that responded?
They were the only responsive bidder. We had two bids. One of them did not meet the criteria of the RFP. And so that was our only choice, and it's a mandated service.
right.
So.
Right,
Yeah.
that's understandable.
Yeah, we would have been much, a lower price would have been great, but
Well, yeah, having more than one bid would have been great too, probably too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was what raised a real,
Very
that,
unfortunate and something that we were, from a budget standpoint, a general fund budget standpoint, devastating really.
Yeah.
going forward. So we are looking at alternatives right now.
Okay.
We have a team of staff put together as well as a couple board members who are discussing alternatives. whether or not it goes back to the original $400,000. We knew for years that that was kind of a situation where we were lucky enough to have a local provider, and we knew if we went out of the area, just looking at other contracts, we knew the cost of it at the market. And the 1.4 million is pretty consistent with other counties who are paying the same thing. Trinity, Siskiyou, Humboldt, they all have these same provider.
I was just going to say, maybe Humboldt had something different, but
No.
It's one of those markets that's, it takes a bigger company usually to get involved, and when they do it, they kind of own the market.
yeah, it's
We
monopoly.
were happy to get more bids. It's been great.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Well, these are the things that I had. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, just following up on that, on the nurse and the change in the price, what exactly, what services are provided? I mean, are we paying for nurses? Are we paying for equipment? So these people are coming from out of the area?
They're actually, all of the nurses now are local. I don't know how many of the local nurses they hired from the last contract. Like I said, we had a local provider, and we had some nurses through that contract as well. I think WellPath actually took some of those nurses and hired them to continue services there. If they couldn't find local nurses, they do bring people out of the area. Like I said, they're a huge corporation. And so you're basically paying for a clinic at the jail in the juvenile hall, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So like a local doctor gets solicited to certain insurance companies, and then they either say they'll accept whatever their reasonable rates are, et cetera, and they sign up with Blue Cross, Kaiser, whatever. So is it something, I guess, similar like that in the respect of, what is the name, WellPath, is that what?
WellPath is the name.
They contact the medical staff, the nurses in this area, and say, hey, do you want to sign up with us? If you do, we have work for you, and this is where it would be, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct.
Is that about
Correct.
They hire
correct?
the staff.
They hire it, and even though it's local, so it's not the traveling nurses, it's not,
I think they do have one traveling nurse on staff.
do that too?
I think the other three, I think there's 2 LVNs and 2 RNs. I'd have to make sure make sure that's correct. There's also a percentage of a doctor. They're not there very often, but they have to do the oversight as far as medications and stuff like that's concerned and sign off on some of the treatment plans. And so we actually share the doctor with Humboldt. The doctor that's at Humboldt also serves Del Norte. And so it's a certain number of hours per week that he comes in for sick call. And they provide sick call on a regular basis now. It's like I said, it's 16 hours a day, so that's why it's very costly as well.
Yeah, they hire local people whenever possible, but at the end of the day, they're responsible for providing that service. So if they bring someone from out of the area, they would do that. But they try to, shop local first, hire local people. And it's a clinic. There's LVNs and RNs, and it's 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, is that what it is? 7 days a week, sorry. Yeah.
That huge 400 and something page document, I can't remember, there's 2 of them, right? Because there's a financial one, and then there's a budget one. They both have different names. When I was looking at, you were just talking about assets. For some reason, when I was looking through it, I thought I saw an asset and an amount of something like $200-something million. Would that be everything that the city or the county owns, and it's listed in the budget as in, if you're just costing out, this is what we own, this is liability, this is asset? Did I find that in another spot? You're looking at me like I'm crazy now.
trying to
I like
think.
that.
No, I don't know where that would be. Doesn't ring a
Unless it's in
bell.
the actual audit.
Did you go through the audit, or did you go through the?
There's financial
Well,
audit.
there's two sets of documents. There's one that, I can't remember the names of them now. One, it was called a financial, trying to remember the name. And then the other one was the budgets, or just, I think, the approved budgets for the fiscal year.
You were probably looking at an audit, which is probably the consolidated annual financial report, the CAFR.
So maybe, I think you're right now, yeah. I think
So
it was
it'd
an
be-
audit, because then it was listing assets as well, and I was like, holy smokes, and then, okay.
Yeah, so that 200 million is probably our overall asset value of the county. Infrastructure,
Roads, bridges, sidewalks.
everything we have.
Okay.
The county has.
Yeah, because this is my first time of really looking at all these documents and trying to figure out, and navigating the website, trying to figure it out, noticing that, like 101 is considered general fund, and then you break things out, the 231 being the sheriff's, and you've got them broken out. So that's just taken me some time to look at. And I've been talking with David, so he's pretty much asked a lot of the questions and that I was thinking of as well. And I appreciate you guys responding to this and our questions, because when I look at the Measure R verbiage and what we're supposed to be doing, I'm thinking that you've already met that by providing us this summary report that shows us how much you're expected to get as a revenue, and then breaking it out of where it's getting spent in accordance with, because now some of the questions that we're asking are being just more specific about some of the, where this Measure R, or maybe not even the Measure R money, where it's being spent, but you're responding to it. Because, for example, in 231, in the sheriff's, in the summary report, and I got to the first line of the revenues, it also says something in there about a state tax amount, or a sales tax amount, and it was in the millions. But I had to go scroll down farther before I found out where it actually had Measure R listed out. So that first revenue, is that just then what is coming out of the general sales tax?
So that's gonna be probably 1.2 to 1.4 million.
Yeah, it was somewhere around that amount.
So that's when we referenced with the vehicles and buying the vehicles outright. That funding source is called Proposition 172, and it's a quarter-cent sales tax across the state that gets allocated back to public safety.
Okay,
So that's sales tax from another statewide source, and that's the one we talked about the vehicles, buying them outright. That's projected, like most sales taxes, right, is gonna be above projection. So we're taking some of those unanticipated revenues, and instead of leasing a vehicle for 3 years back to ourselves, we're just gonna buy it outright. So it is sales tax, but it's not Measure R, it's a different sales tax.
coming out of a different line item, I got you, or in revenues. Okay, all righty. Pretty much it for me. Anybody else have anything?
Yeah, I just had a question about the adjustments. Those were all raises to the, what was the percentage of was it like a cost of living?
It was a
or-
cost of living for public safety, it was 11% at the jail and sheriff's office. And then I wanna say it was 10% the DA investigators. Is that correct?
And probation officers.
And probation officers were 10%. And then the miscellaneous employees at the sheriff's office received,
Well, I think all the corrections staff at jail
Oh, yeah.
and juvenile hall were both 7.5%. And this was, going into these discussions and actually deciding what percentages we were going to shoot for was based on the public market. We were losing people both across the border and locally, to Crescent City PD, to Brookings PD, to Curry County Sheriff's Office. Delaware County kind of became a training ground for these other agencies because our wages were so much lower than theirs. With these adjustments, we're still not equal to them, but we're a lot closer and a lot more competitive, and that was the intent. We've heard continuously from the community how our officers are inexperienced because we are training them and we're losing them. And so this is hopefully an attempt to recruit and retain some people that are more experienced, keep them at Delaware County.
I also had another question. So with the, I'm not sure if it was the county or the city, though. They were talking about when on these new hires, the new hires that they're getting, give them the bonus that was going to pay out over time. Was that county?
No, it's
That was city.
Yes.
Have you guys
That's
considered
right.
something like that?
We have. We've considered just about everything you can think of to try to retain some officers because it's been very difficult. Our staffing turnover there has been ongoing for a long, long time.
Right.
Dispatch, the patrol unit, the jail unit. I think the jail unit probably is as full as it's been in a long, long time, which is good. But yeah, we've considered all kinds of incentives. The wage adjustments was something that was across the board. It's not targeted to any one person who's new or who's this or who's that. It affects everybody and benefits everybody who's at the staffing right now. And so that's why we went with that approach. It doesn't mean it'll be the only thing we do going forward. It depends on how this works out. If we continue to lose our deputies and our corrections people to other organizations, then we're gonna have to think of something.
and one thing we do, I think it was maybe 15 years ago, or so. We offer, for the deputies that put themselves through the academy and pay for it themselves and come to work for us, we do a $1,000 reimbursement per year for the first 3 years. So we try and offset the cost they've incurred while being at the academy. But instead of doing it all up front, we do, after year 1, you get $1,000, after year 2, it's $1,000. And that's been that static number for a long time, and it's part of their negotiated contract. So we don't do necessarily the incentive bonus the city's talking about, but years ago we did try and, if you come and work for us, we'll kind of help pay off some of your schooling.
How much does it cost for the academy? What's it cost them?
I
Just
couldn't
curious.
tell you.
Currently, I don't know. Yeah. I'd hate to even guess. It's been a long time since
Yeah.
I heard that number.
Yeah. Probably more than the 3,000 or 5,000 that I'm talking about. Well, yep.
I know with LAPD, when they go and train a new officer, they have a, what is it, 16-week training. And then after that, they have 9 months out in the field
David,
training.
can we give you the mic there, please?
Still on?
Okay. I know with LAPD, they had a 16-week training course in the academy, and then after that, they had another 6 or 9 months before they finally became a true post-certified. And at that time, this is 12 years ago, it was $15,000 or $18,000 that LAPD would have invested in them, not including the pay, because it's a paid training.
It's much more expensive to bring on new hires and train them, especially in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Get them through all the steps, than to retain. But like Mr. Lopez said, we're trying to figure out ways to recruit and retain our public safety officers.
Right.
But yeah, they do a 6 or 9 month one. It's a state standard. They have to
Yeah.
go through the academy.
Yeah, to be post-certified.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
When we lived in Shasta County, they had the same thing with the nursing. I'm a registered nurse, 33 years. But the same thing, Shasta County has a nursing program, and their hospitals, they would hire all the new grads, and 2 years, 3 years max, they're out of there and doing traveling or whatever. So retention in that field was also difficult, and they did the graduated reimbursements and bonuses and stuff to try to help offset that, the people leaving, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's difficult. Did you have something?
One other thing with LAPD is they had, because they were having a lot of their officers work a year, 18 months, and then they would transfer to like Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, where there's less crime, obviously. They started having their officers sign a contract. Now, I don't know if you guys are thinking about this, but they had them sign a 5-year contract to where they would be obligated for 5 years. I think when I left, they dropped it down to 3. But they also gave them incentives to stay, and if they worked out properly, they would already be promoted, to some of them were SLOs, senior lead officers and that kind of thing, to where they didn't want to leave after that point because they had already promoted, they've already gotten they already know how the job is, and they've gotten their feet wet, and they know what's expected of them and what to do. So I don't know, that's maybe an option too, for the sheriff.
Yeah, they grew up with any ideas. It's a problem experienced across the country as far as hiring.
Oh, yeah.
employees
Oh,
and
especially
retaining
now.
new employees, and law enforcement's not
Oh, yeah.
immune to it, and it's an expensive endeavor to bring someone on brand new.
Oh, yeah. And it's so hard to find somebody that wants to come on brand new now. That's the big one. Any other questions from anybody?
How much of a wage disparity is there between, say, Humboldt or Curry to us? I mean, is there a big wage disparity?
Humboldt would be pretty significant. We didn't compare to Humboldt. We tried to just compare to our local agencies and then other governments that are our size. We have other local agencies that are our size, and so we usually use those as a benchmark for our market and try to be competitive. I think that we're still probably, anywhere from 5% to 7% out from some of our local competitors. We may be a little closer than that with this current wage adjustment, but that doesn't mean what's going on in their, agencies as far as negotiations are concerned also. I'm not sure what city PD officers receive through Measure S. So I don't know how that's changed. We were basing our figures on when we were going through this process in April and May. So that could have easily changed by now for any of our local other agencies. So, yeah, like I said, we couldn't reach the standard that the other ones are at, but we wanted to get as close as we possibly could. And hopefully this just that they're from Delaware County and they want to stay here, so.
Yeah, we try and compare who we're losing them to, which is the PD, City PD, Curry County, Brookings. And then we do a comparison of like-sized counties. You know, Humboldt County is 250,000 people, so it's hard to draw that line between the two. But it's part of the process.
So, is there other things that we can do that's local to our area that you can offer, like for, I don't know, like gym memberships or I don't know, I don't even know. We don't have a lot of social stuff here to.
All those additional benefits are negotiated through their contract, so it'd have to be brought forward by their association,
Oh, got it.
Sheriff's Employee Association. I think they actually do have gym
They
memberships.
do
currently.
have a gym membership.
Yeah, we have gym memberships. We do have incentives for post certificates. So as they advance through the post series, intermediate to advanced and management, there are incentives like 2.5% when you go from one certificate to another. And so those are incentives that are already built into their contract. So those are all negotiated benefits in their contract. So they do have several incentives as far as that's concerned. If they're assigned to certain tasks, like a drug task force or something like that, they actually get an incentive as well. So those are built into the contract and they're brought forward by the association.
If they get their AA or bachelor's, there's incentives for that, so you can progress through.
Thank you.
If we don't have any more on the first agenda item, we can go to the second one, which is the Measure Our Budget Update. And we've kind of been touching on a lot on that anyway. And I know that a lot of your questions are not specific to Measure R today, but they do involve the departments. The Measure R is funding, which is the jail and sheriff's office, and then also fixed assets. So it's okay to, I assumed it's okay for us to have those conversations and answer those questions because it is kind of tied back to general fund. So the next one, like I said, is the budget update. I did the budget update, as you can see, as the next category. It kind of just lays out the budget that was approved by the Board of Supervisors in each of the categories and the amount that was allocated to each of those. I also touched on the recruiting difficulties in that paragraph below that. The last paragraph of that document addresses the infrastructure issues right now. In the most recent budget for fiscal year 21-22, we have to keep in mind that it's less than a year old for an actual operating budget. And so this is our first shot at this Measure R stuff. One of the things that I think has been misinformation out there that needs to be addressed is that Measure R is set up in a separate fund. We did not include it into the general fund budget. So each year will not be absorbed by the general fund. Any other general fund revenue that's part of 101, the budget, or the fund 101 you talked about, is, well, at the end of the year when it closes out, it's kind of all closed into one fund of 101. If we would have included Measure R in that, it would have done the same thing. So any excess revenues would have been absorbed by that fund at the year-end close. So we set up a separate fund by the direction of the board and under Clint's suggestion, so we could track that funding separately. It makes it easier for transparency. It makes it easier for this committee to actually say, okay, these funds are being spent on what Measure R was intended for, because it's all in one fund, all the revenues and expenditures. And so by not spending these funds as soon as we expected to during fiscal year 21-22, all those funds will roll over to next fiscal year, which is a big deal. I mean, it really is. And so for our infrastructure and capital projects, we had $470-some thousand allocated to that. With the unexpected revenue that's coming in, that fund balance should be significantly higher than that at the end of the year. We also had a projection for fiscal year 2021 because we received April, May, and June of 2021. We didn't start receiving that, of course, until after that, but that will also increase the fund balance at year end. And so you can imagine what the costs are for infrastructure projects and capital improvement projects these days. I mean, even residential building is out of control. And so any of those types of projects are extremely expensive. So we're hoping to either build up a fund balance where we can actually start addressing some of the more significant issues from a capital improvement standpoint, or use that funding for match funding for state and federal funds that are available. In the past, there have been funding available that requires a 10 to 20% match that we couldn't touch. If you look at $30 million, we didn't have that amount of money in general fund in order to match those funds and bring those funds into our community. If we get a situation where we can establish a fund balance, we can use those funds for match funds, and it's something that we're looking at. Some of the projects we've talked about through Measure R have included improvements at the agriculture an animal control facility, because they're in bad need of upgrades out there. We've talked about the Veterans Memorial Building, because they have some issues over there as far as the roof, restrooms, the upstairs, could really use some improvements over there. We've talked about, like I said, using it as match funding. We've talked about a recreation gymnasium that the community uses on a regular basis. They need some really upgrades over there as far as ADA compliance is concerned. We're talking about moving our actual rec department over there again. Years ago, I don't know if anybody remembers that, the rec department was over there, the staffing was over there. We're going to do that here pretty soon, and so we're updating the offices and things like that as well. So there are several things that have been discussed, but not knowing what kind of revenue we were going to receive, we didn't want to commit to anything that was above the budget, basically.
I have a question. So you're looking at money in the general fund, you would use the Measure R as a matching fund, and is that only if you can't get grants and other things to pay for those projects?
Yes, correct. There's so much funding out there right now through the federal and state government for all
Right.
this COVID stuff and Bring Back Better and infrastructure and everything else. It's like all these funding sources have been out there for improvements, for infrastructure, and we just haven't been able to touch that because of the lack of capacity we have in our staffing right now. We're all so on a day-to-day basis just trying to keep things going that it's really hard to kind of look at some of these funding sources that are available. We're talking also about Measure R adding a grants position. This county has not had a grants position, a dedicated grants position, for as long as I can remember. And it's something that's very significant. We get updates from the state and federal advocates on a regular basis about grant funding that's available. And many times we have a chance to kind of glance over it, but we don't have any time to commit to that and actually go through that list and see how it could benefit this community. Having that dedicated position would be huge. And we're working with somebody right now who has been a grant writer for over 20 years, who has agreed to mentor this person if we actually establish this position and bring them in. Like I said, it was going to be tied to Measure R. We're kind of hesitant now with all of the pushback on Measure R, but it's something that's badly needed, and it's something I think that would be a huge benefit to this community.
Also, what is the difference between your patrol wage adjustment and your new planner position patrol wage adjustment categories here?
Typo, he said.
Typo.
Okay.
That was 100% me. I was this morning trying to finish some things up, and no, so we had a new planning position.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay.
Good spot.
It had to be one, you won the prize. It was a test.
So what did we get for the animal control and planning? What all was involved in that? Can you shed a little more light on that?
Yeah, definitely. The planning was an additional position, planner position. Randy can speak to this for sure because he was actually a planner in CDD for many years. I think it's been a little over 10 years since we've had more than one planning position in that department. Oftentimes the administrative staff have had the planning background, and so they've been able to assist with that. But the services and the demand on the planning department exceed one person by probably 3 or 4 times. So we've worked forever. The board's priorities have been, for years that I can remember on budget priorities, has been a planner, but we haven't been able to fund that. And so with Measure R, we had the dedicated funding to create another planning position. And so that's what that is for planning. The animal services side of things, as you can imagine, that's one of the most highly sought after services in this community. We are constantly getting phone calls about the lack of animal services and the lack of animal control. And it has nothing to do with the people that are out there. They are working their butts off. I mean, they are just overwhelmed with the amount of service demand that's out here in our community. They just have very low staffing. They've forever had 2 animal control officers, but they very rarely have both of them filled. Justin, who was the only supervisory position out there, he was a department head. He hasn't had a deputy department head for probably a decade. And so he's been the single administrator out there for both departments for a long, long time, which is just really overwhelming. It's really hard to do all those duties at one person. And so with that demand on the services, he came forward with a request to create a supervisory position for the animal control division, which we've talked about for quite a few years, but again, it's been funding constraints. And so we created an animal services supervisor position now, which is also, that's been flown this week, I think. So it's actively open for recruitment right now, which should help significantly out there. So that would leave 3 operating positions out there for animal services, which would be a supervisor and 2 animal control officers. So we're hopeful that's going to make some really positive changes out there.
Aren't there a lot of volunteers out there as well?
Yes, and without them,
Does
we would.
anybody keep any track of the hours that those people were spending out there?
I think that Justin does. If he doesn't, I know that there's a volunteer out there that tracks everything. And so, yeah, without the volunteers, that place would be maybe trouble. I mean, I can't say enough about the volunteers and the hours they put out there and what they've done for that location.
You made a comment there as far as the Measure R money not being directly going into general fund. The last meeting we had, I believe that was put to us in the opposite, that this money did go into the general fund. So I just want to clarify on this.
So,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't know why we would have said that because it is a separate fund. It's a general fund tax and it can be used for general services, but we are accounting for it separately. Yeah. It could easily be included in the general fund because it is a general tax. But like I said, for transparency, yeah.
That's the confusion right there.
yeah, so it's a general tax that can be used for pretty much anything, I guess. But we house all the funds in its own fund. That way we know what we have and don't have and doesn't get commingled with anything else. And then we transfer from that fund to the departments it's approved for. But at the end of the year, I can run a report for, it's actually, 101 is the general fund, 157 is the fund for Measure R. So we can run those reports separate and tell you exactly what we do and don't have and where it went.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments or anything like that?
I think what I would like to address just really quick also is that, there's been conversations about supplanting, which is part of the role of the Oversight Committee is to make sure that we're not supplanting other services with this funding. I think it's going to be important that under the resolution for the committee that each of the departments who are receiving Measure R funds have to submit a report to you prior to you guys preparing a report for the Board of Supervisors at the end of the year. So that'll be very beneficial also. You'll have all the information from the departments who are receiving these funds. And they can also attest to the fact that it's not supplanting anything that was available prior to Measure R.
Right.
So we've created new positions that provide services. We've created the wage adjustments to hopefully be more competitive in the market. But all of that stuff is new spending. It's not supplanting any existing services that we're spending prior to that.
Okay, so then I guess our next question would be, when do we want to have another meeting before the end of the fiscal year? So we can look at those reports.
Well, the actual resolution specifies that you will meet in the fourth quarter, which is April through June.
April
sorry,
through
excuse
June.
me.
So,
And it's prior to the actual adopted or recommended budget in June. That the second meeting in June of each
Right.
fiscal year, the board, under the government code, will adopt a spending plan. Last fiscal year, they actually did it the first meeting of June because of scheduling issues with the board members. And so we did it the first meeting instead of the second, but typically it's the second meeting in June. And under the resolution, all the departments will provide that documentation to you about the report of receiving Measure R funds. You guys have the ability to develop your report. You can either submit it in writing to the board, or one of you can choose to present it to the board. You can do both, really, if you wanted to.
I think I can speak for the rest of the board, and I think we ought to go ahead and have a line item on the agenda for one of us to go ahead and present the report, because I think that's something that we've all discussed, that we'd like to have it read into the report, along with having the report itself. So when are those reports due to you from those departments?
It's in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, so I can request them now. And we actually have talked about doing that
Okay.
even prior to this, outside of the requirement of the resolution for the Measure R committee. We thought it was very important for these departments who are receiving these funds to come to a board meeting and actually talk about what this is doing to their department and what it means to their department.
Okay.
The benefit to their department and the services to the community that Measure R funding is providing.
Right.
I think that's pretty important. But that'll be part of the reports to you guys too that they will submit to you in writing.
Okay. So I guess what we ought to try and do is get a tentative date, maybe? You guys think about that? Like maybe the first week of May, would that work? Could we try and do something like?
Why don't you think about the timing of what it will take for you guys to put together a report? I'll make sure that the departments get something to you prior to that. Give you
Yeah, because I think we ought to, if we could get the reports by what? The last week of April? That way we could come in like the second week of May?
Right, whenever they,
Yeah, whenever they can, yeah.
I mean, we don't have to meet formally, like.
No, we could all just get together.
Get together.
We could all just get together and have coffee somewhere, and we can.
You're buying.
Okay.
Anyways, no, just kidding.
I'll bring my coffee pot. But I think that would probably work out the best for us if we can get that report by the end of the last week of April. That way we can get something put together for ourselves? Because I don't think we need you guys by that point, do we? Do we need to have you
I know,
involved
but
with
there is a
it?
meeting required in that fourth quarter. So-
Okay, well, I'm just saying, but we could get our report put together and then
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah, you don't need us for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we get our report put together, and then we can have another meeting.
Yep.
Because I'm thinking if we can get the reports at the end of April, that'll give us the first, 2 weeks in May? Sound good? That way we can schedule it for sometime between the first 2 weeks of May. Does that sound good for you? And then we'll get the report put together. And then when we get our date for our getting the report put together, I'll contact you, and then we'll set up another meeting, probably the end of May.
Yeah, end of May, early June would work either way. Like I said, the board meeting where the report would be made,
Right.
you would be the second meeting in June, which is probably gonna be the 20-something.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to make sure that we have enough time we're trying to work out the timeline.
Yeah.
On the fly, I don't have my phone. I'm just trying to make sure that we have enough time to get things put together so we're not rushed. That's all.
You gotta get it done now.
Oh, it was supposed to be done last week.
It would be June 21st would be that second meeting in June.
Okay, so if we have our meeting the last week of May, that way we'll have everything lined up, and then all we have to do is present it to the board.
All
We'll
right,
need it to the board by the 14th.
what's that?
We'll need a report by the 14th.
Yeah, I'll pull a thing.
Yeah.
For the agenda deadline would be the 14th, so the
Right.
Tuesday before the meeting.
Right.
Yep,
So
plenty of time.
that's all I'm thinking. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that we get our timeline straight while we got everybody here.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so you'll email us the reports, and then when we get the emails, I'll send something out, and we'll all get together, and we'll take a couple hours, and we'll go through it all.
You betcha.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for anybody? No? I guess we're good.
All right, thanks. Just in closing, I just briefly wanted to mention there is going to be an update report on Tuesday's meeting for Measure R. It'll be similar to what the information I just provided to you, so just in case anybody's interested.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you all. We're adjourned.